Hi, I'm Scott Klein. I'm a senior technical evangelist here at Microsoft, and I get the pure joy of evangelizing and talking about our big data technologies around the world. Today, I'm going to spend a few minutes and tell you about a lot of the big data technologies that we use our hackathons around the world. So what we're looking at here is our Azure Management Portal. This is where we listed all of our Azure services. So you look here, we've got quite a few. You can see there's our SQL database. This is our SQL Server as a Service. When we do our big data hackathons, we're really focusing on two or three key services. They're right here. The first one is HD Insight. If you look at this, we have HD Insight. Then if we scroll down a little more, we can see what we have, machine learning. The difference between those two, if you're familiar with HD Insight is Hadoop as a service. Hadoop really is mass distributing, mass file processing at scale. So if I have terabytes and terabytes of unstructured data, then I can take that data and distribute that data across thousands of nodes if necessary, process that data, get better insights into that data, maybe reduce that data down into something more manageable. So HD Insight is Hadoop as a service. We're not going to spend most of our time or any time here because what we really want to do is focus on the technology that we have as a service that really lets us and allows us to get better insights into our data and do predictive analytics in our data. And that really is machine learning. Machine learning really is the ability to do data analysis, data discovery. I may be sitting on tons and tons of data. How do I really start understanding that data? And it's really not just data we may be sitting on, but data that we may be streaming or gathering real time or near real time. So how do I start understanding that data? And this is where the power of machine learning comes. So if we take a look at this, there's really not a whole lot we can do here in the portal. The power from this comes when we go into what's called our machine learning studio. And our machine learning studio is where we start developing our experiments and our plans as to how do we start getting insights into that data. And the key here, the real beauty of machine learning is that we can take data from all sorts of data sources. If we look at this, we can create a new and say, well, what type of data sets do we want to bring in, start using and get better insights into? I can say from local file. If we take a look at the different types of data that we can really bring in, obviously there's standard types like CSV files, text files. But the power here and the flexibility we have here is where we can actually do what's called analysis type data or R data. And so if anybody's familiar with working with R, then we can bring in R type data and use that in our predictive analytics and our experiment and our models. When we start working with machine learning, there's other ways we can bring data in too. So let's say we want to create a new model and a new experiment. We can say, well, let's create a blank experiment here. And one of the things that we can do here is if we have data out on the internet, for example, that we want to bring in, we can say, well, we have a sample data sets out here. We're not going to play with those. But maybe we want to bring in data from other locations, like maybe the web or maybe SQL Server, like relational data or non-relational data. So we can drag a data reader over to our model. And then over here, we can say, well, we want to look at and bring in other types of data for our data source. And we can bring in web URL or data from an open data source type of data. A lot of companies or a lot of cities, per se, have data that they make public. It could be health data or city data or county data, things like that, that are publicly available that you can use to do predictive analytics on and do data discovery on. We can also bring in things from relational and non-relational, maybe a data feed provider like an RSS feed, things like that. But this really gives us the ability to start getting better insights into all sorts of data, not just relational, non-relational, but could be data from anywhere, any type, any shape, any form of data. But if you look at this, this really is the ability to start creating and doing experiments. And this is where data modeling comes into play. How can I get better insights into my data, whether that's data streaming in from one of these sources or data that I have from a data set, from an open data source and things like that. One of the things that we can look at is the different types of data sets that we have in our Azure Machine Learning. These are sample data sets, so we can think that there's blood donation data, there's Airport Go data sets, there's German credit data, there's even movie ratings data, and things like, look, there's cancer and breast cancer data that when we go out and do these hackathons, we're looking to code for a cause and hack for a cause. So we actually reach out to the open data source and say, well, how can we go and hack for a cause and get data that we can actually return back to the community and do good for the community? And this is really where the power of open data source comes into play. If you want to look to see how we actually use some of these models and some of these data sets to create sample models, then we can actually go over back to our data model here. and look at some of the samples that we've actually created and allow you to use and modify to see how we actually do machine learning. So you can see how we did there's the breast cancer data set. And some of these are fairly complex. It's a good idea to start looking at some of these models, say, how are we doing? How do we use our data? How do we do and score models and experiments? And once we do that, once we get our model created, we can actually publish that out as a web service and make that available for others to use and consume. So the whole purpose of these hackathons is to allow you to start, one, understand that, look, Microsoft has a whole set of these big data technologies and how to start using these big data technologies to get better insights into your open source data or even private data, for example. So if you're a large corporation, a global ISV, things like that, and you want to start getting insights into data and start doing true data discovery on that data, then these are the tools that you can use to do that and to do better predictive analytics, make better business decisions based on this data that you've consumed and they're sitting on. So we've done quite a few of these hackathons already throughout the globe, and let me show you a couple of examples of some of the solutions that a lot of our users have created during these hackathons. So I'm just going to show you two. Let me show you the first one. So anytime we do a data hackathon, there's really two challenges that we do. There's a data modeling challenge and a data visualization challenge. And this is a good example of the data visualization challenge. So they took prescription spending and social deprivation and basically said, based on someone's income, what are their opportunities, what are their challenges around getting prescription help and things like that. And they took that data, sent that data through HD Insight, and then used Power BI and Power Map to visualize this data and say, okay, based on this geography and based on a certain geography and based on your income and things like that, what kind of a challenge do you have for getting prescriptions? This was kind of an interesting one because you can tell people spend a lot of time and research on looking at, how do we visualize that data? And one of the great things about the Power BI tools is that you can actually do great things around visualizing the data. Visualizing data is an awesome challenge because it really helps you see clearly how this data is segregated. And so here you can see, look, based on the darker the area, the better options they have is getting the more money they had to spend on prescriptions and things like that. One of the other challenges that we had was, like I said, the data modeling challenge. And we just walked through a little bit of modeling through Azure machine learning. And one of the solutions that won was this real-time decision support system. It was actually written in R, and we saw kind of the R data types that you can bring in, R data. But it was written in R, and what it does is it generates treatment recommendations for ICU patients using this Markov chains type of model. And so based on the data that was coming in, they ran this through an R algorithm, and it generated the recommendations for ICU patients. So based on the type of emergency coming in, type of treatment you needed, depended on how you were routed through the ICU. This was a data model, but they also put a data visualization piece on top of that. But they used machine learning to do predictive analytics and do recommendations based on the type of treatments they were getting in the ICU. So these are the kind of things that you can do with the data, and the data can be any type. So this is medical data. We saw through the data visualization that you could do city type data, whether it's parking data, meter data. One hackathon, they actually used graffiti data. So they correlated parking tickets with graffiti. So the higher the parking tickets up, the more graffiti they found in the cities. Really interesting. So you always want to do data correlation like this, and this is what they did here. So we hack for a cause, so hopefully when we do these hackathons in your area, we'd love to see you there. But let's go out and have some fun. So hope to see you at some of these hackathons.